nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.
Welcome to the Black Man's Cup podcast. This is your host, Too Black, dealing with a bunch of colonized Christmas niggas. But
Hey, don't put me in that shit. Hey,
so,
relax.
so, so we doing our Black Missing Review episode. This shouldn't be super long. This year was every year. Every time I look at the recording, every time y'all are like, it was a lot. But I think this year, I actually, for once, agree with you. Uh, Sometimes then y'all just be dramatic, but this year it's actually a lot. So this year and really last year. So this year I don't know, felt like patchwork sometimes, but I think the episode still came out right. It was just a lot of scheduling and stuff like that that made it a little bit more challenging. Um, Shout out to the patrons real quick. Only have two, so make this very quick. Howdy Die Diddy Duty and and Deep Teeth. Shout out to y'all for signing up. But yeah, so I don't know, just some reflections and we can just kind of run through our list. We'll primarily focus on the ones that we were all on together. And there's ones particular I wanted to talk about because we've actually been quiet since we did this episode, and y'all know what I'm talking about. Um, so I want to talk about that one. We ain't gonna get in no trouble. I just want to reflect since we are about, I don't know, 10 months removed from that.
Hopefully
And
we won't
then
get in trouble.
say what?
Hopefully we won't get in trouble. You said that the last time.
Well, we're not gonna say anything to get in trouble. You know, how people interpret it is up to them.
True that, true that.
But so yeah, I don't know. It's just reflections on this past year. Again, I know we haven't been at work as a unit as much. It's been a lot of like just kind of step up, next man up kind of thing, but just open the floor for that.
Yeah, 2024 beat my ass for like 75% of it was the struggle of the bus. I just I'm just glad to see we made it to the end. Quarter four has been somewhat kinder. Um, and I'm just very ready for next year. I'm very ready to close this. And I feel like we said the same thing last year, which is sad. But I don't even know if I'm ready for next year because we got that little orange bitch coming back into office. That's gonna be a mess. Who knows? I'm buckling up and we're just gonna ride the ride. And hopefully next December when we're back as a as a group doing this exact same episode, that we will not be repeating the same language of X year beat our ass.
Yeah, I mean, this was a very unique year, even for our standards. So, so, so in good and bad
That's a good
ways.
point.
Yeah.
For our standards, yes, this is
Yeah.
a very unique year. A lot has been going on. A lot has been going on, but we survived. Woo.
Barely.
Barely. But yeah, I don't know. I guess my reflection on this year, this year has been a wild roller coaster. Yeah, a lot of heartache, but at the same time, a lot of healing. Um, but there's been some shining moments. You know what I mean? Um, as far as us as a podcast, we had some pivotal moments, some episodes that we're going to talk about, and as the year wrap up. Especially one episode in particular, we kind of alluding to it. But yeah, yeah, I can't really complain. I'm ready for 2025 to start. That's it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think last year we did some kind of like reflection of accomplishments. I didn't write out a list for that this year. I don't even know what those would be other than doing the podcast. I guess I mean, I don't know. There was some things like my book coming out. I feel like we never all got to be on the same screen for that, I don't believe.
Hmm.
So I think I looked at that as an accomplishment of the podcast, not just
Hmm.
me or Rasul, just because a lot of that research was done for this. Not a lot, not some of the research was done for this show. A whole chapter specifically on Black Wall Street literally came out of this show. Like I wouldn't have done that research probably not being on this show. This nigga had to go grab the book.
I'm just saying,
Um,
shameless plug. Help,
it's blurred out, but Laundering Black Rage for those who can't see it. But no, I really do appreciate y'all for that. I feel like that was a very much a product of this show. Like that, I don't want to make it. It didn't feel like it was just me. That felt like a product of
Yeah.
a lot of people. So, um,
it makes a
but I
great
think
stocking stuffer.
Great stocking stuffer.
kind of
It does
late for
not
that.
fit in a
Yeah.
stocking, but it does
Hey,
make a
wait,
gift.
Black. Did I do the indexing for that this year or was it like last year? That was last
That
year,
was
right?
last year.
Okay. All right.
I think you did. You
Also,
started last year because we got back proofs and then you had to redo it because the page
Mm,
numbers, you had to just identify words first. Then you
mm.
had to put the page numbers in later. And
Yeah,
I'm glad I
all
got
that
to
was
do
a
that
blur.
before you so I could tell you what to do. That shit sucks. Indexing is not fun.
It's
I just want
not
y'all to
fun.
Um,
see
It
I just
it
want y'all
was
to
a
see how he
blur.
signed my book. Like my brother, Two Black. This is how he signed my book. Just Terrell, Two Black, TB.
TB.
Hold on, love, TB.
TB.
what y'all want me to say? You lucky you
But
got
yeah,
that.
But bro,
But
I don't even think my name is Divine. I think
bro,
it's
that was
called
the
Cute.
that was
I'm not
that's
shit.
about what we were expecting. That's about what we could expect.
that was look, Rasul is worse. I mean, we were at a book signing. I handed him a book to sign. He was like, "What am I supposed to do?" I'm like, "You supposed to," like he was like looking at it like, "What do I do with this?" I'm like, "Bro, you got to sign the book." So you think I'm bad? But no, our book's done pretty well. We'll have more talks coming up this year. But for a book
yeah.
that came out of a rinky-dink pod with no big backing of anybody, other than some decent blurbs, like we've done pretty well to the point where I don't want to rant about the publisher, but they had the right idea of upping the price because it was doing so well, which made no sense. Like they actually raised the price $2. Yeah. But anyway, go ahead, Terrell.
Um, I feel like every year since 2016, bro, it's just been shit. Like at the year end, you just like shit. But specifically 2024, yeah, definitely some ups, definitely some downs. I'm just excited. My son was born. Happy. My wife did amazing for y'all that need to know. She did a great job. I'm so proud of her. I was there the whole time. I didn't pass out, but I definitely needed a couple shots afterwards. Um, and he's happy, healthy, and keeping us awake.
It's just the cutest little baby. We
I
just
know.
He's back there taking a nap now. So
I know you mad that you can't take a nap right now.
you gotta sleep when he sleeps. That's
I
he runs the house and he knows it. He runs the house and he knows it.
I mean, if I was that cute, I'd run the house too. So
Bro, he looked at me the other day, was like, not only is you a bitch, but you my bitch. You stupid motherfucker.
I'm done with you. We're done.
Bro,
Oh my goodness.
he knows what he's doing. 4 months, he knows what he's doing now.
When the baby hears this episode of the podcast and he hears your interpretation of what he said, I just hope it gives you a blowout.
Oh, he's gonna do that anyway.
Um,
I think
We
he
took a
has
lot of
pissing on.
L's, we had some W's, and yeah, very ready for next year.
I think pissing on daddy is his favorite game.
that's every 4 months years old's
Yeah,
favorite.
like,
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so it was again, I mean, we're coming up as of this upcoming year, as of March, this upcoming year will be at 5 years for the pod. Um, I mean, we've done, I need not list everything. We've done a decent amount of stuff here in terms of not just the pod, we've gotten people to join orgs, we've raised money and broke stories on political prisoners, we've done our own live show. We have another one coming up this year at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Um, so we've grown our numbers, we've helped grow a collective on our broader channel now that has now been renamed since last year, Black Liberation Media. So, you know, I think and I think our analysis remains strong this year despite all the different challenges behind the scenes. So just to get, I'm gonna run through the list of myths, and then we can reflect on the ones that we were all a part of, because I know a lot of these we didn't all get to join in on. If someone has a comment on any specific one, please do, but I'm not gonna focus too long on any one. So the first ones of the year, we did a three-parter. Prisons are built for profit. We'll come back to a broader discussion on that. Um, and that was, as it states, like the primary driving factor as to why mass incarceration grew and why prisons exist is for profit. And as we show, more money goes into prisons than comes out of them. So it runs at a loss. That's in business terms. But there are entities that profit within prisons, whether that be private prisons, whether that be the folks that, charge the telephones, the apps that people use, pretty much anything. But that's the truth with all governmental entities, that they have private public relationships. So we demonstrated that there's, much worse things driving prison in some ways than just pure profit. And that's an oversimplification of the problem. First episode, we dealt with like the myth itself. And then the second one, we actually show you what did drive mass incarceration, which is much more complicated. And then the third one, we dealt with counterinsurgency with Dr. Orasami Burton in his book, Tip of the Spear. Um, that was in January and March. And then later in February, we did an episode with Dr. Joy James but we did an episode with Dr. Joy James, The Lesser Evil and it was based on her book, Newborn Abolition. And then that was me and Ryan, I believe, that did that interview. And then March, we did Racial Reckoning. The myth was Racial Reckoning. And all of these are myths for those who, for some chance, have never seen the show. All of these are myths. Um, uh, and that was about that was based around our book, Liner and Black
Hmm.
Rage. And then in April, we did The State is the Government. That's also based around our book, and that was
Hmm.
with Rasul. So I think on Racial Reckoning, Rasul interviewed me, and then on State of the Government, we interviewed him. Um,
Yeah, that was a fun little switch up. That was
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So the
Shout out
Racial
to
Reckoning,
Russell.
yeah. So the Racial Reckoning was just when 2020, everybody calls 2020 a racial reckoning, and we were just like, there's really no evidence that suggests this. And we used the analysis of our book to break that down. Then the state as the government, we used a lot of Rasul's work on the state, that the state cannot be limited to just the government. And a lot of people will just call the government the state and don't deal with other factors, including what people might call private. And private public is really a false binary in some ways. Um, Again, I'm not going to say to defend any of these episodes. So people want to go, if you don't agree, go listen to the episode. That's fine. Um, in May, there was a two-parter. I did this one, The End of History, with Makila Erskog, and that was about, how's the easiest way to explain? It was about hyper-imperialism. It was a dossier put out by Tricontinental Institute, and when the Soviet Union finally fell in 1991, and really even earlier in 89, there's discussion that it was the end of history, as in all ideas had been tried and all failed, and the only idea that worked was capitalism and liberal democracy. That was the idea. So we demonstrated that's what we meant. That's what it means by the end of history. And there was a book written about this, and that's this claim that the West was making, that it's the end of history. Communism doesn't work, socialism doesn't work, fascism doesn't work, all these other things don't work. Only liberal democracy and capitalism as a unit, as a package works. So we showed how hyper imperialism, defined by them, demonstrates that that's not effectively working, and they've actually ran the world even further into the ground.
Of
Um,
course the West would say some shit like that.
Yeah.
That's
so
that's
yeah.
wild. That's fucking wild.
And I think a Japanese dude actually wrote the book, but Japan, as we say in our book, is like token. We always say token white capital, like they're very much aligned with the West more than anybody in the so-called global South.
It really
Um,
is.
Yeah.
And as a
so,
whole.
I mean, there's others like South Korea and stuff, but nothing to the extent of Japan, which was colonized once by Korea was once colonized by Japan. Another one was the myth was Africans don't value democracy, kind of playing off that other episode. Was kind of a complimentary there, and that's the idea that in African nations particularly cannot fit. They don't want to try democracy. They almost prefer this kind of like cartoonist authoritarianism and don't actually believe in democratic control of society, even though the United States often uses democracy in air quotes as a means of regime change and overthrowing a country that actually is looking to get some kind of independence.
Hey,
And then
pause
we
real quick.
did
I'm
what's
sorry to
up?
interrupt, but just I'm still catching up on some of the episodes that I haven't been on. But aren't they trying like different forms of government out there other than the bullshit dictatorships and like I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure y'all went into
Hmm.
the went into it on the episode, but I'm like other than capitalism and what is it democracy or whatever, they're trying other forms of
Yeah,
government out there.
people have been trying and they're trying now,
Yeah,
particularly in the
And some
Western
are getting,
Sahel.
if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken,
I was
some
about to say this.
are actually being pretty successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say the Sahel states. Yeah, are definitely a great example of that. You know, Niger,
Western Sahel, not the Sahel actually goes across the region,
I
but
got to go back and
the
I
Western
haven't finished
Sahel. You're right.
catching up on those episodes.
Niger, it's Niger, Burkina Faso, and
Mali.
Mali, right?
Yeah.
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 I haven't finished catching up on all our episodes, but I'm gonna say I don't remember where I heard it from or where I read it or whatever, but I'm pretty sure like when you said it, I was like, who the fuck is thinking that?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
a thing. It's a
ran out
thing.
of
You can
chips.
find articles on it. Yeah.
Oh man.
I ran out of chips. I'm done.
My bad,
Cam's
my bad.
never
I had
letting that.
you can keep that in, take it out. I just had to
No, it's fine. It's fine.
yeah.
Cam's never letting that go. That was with Nicholas Richard Thompson and Tunde from Black Alliance of Peace. That was, and then we did another one with them.
Bat, bat.
Yep, and we did
Hmm.
another one with them called "What About the Congo?" because it was this very reactionary, and we saw different trends of reactionary takes this year about Palestine. So there was this thing when people were, and this is what that came out in June. So at the kind of, I don't know if it was at the height, but it definitely last summer, coming out for the student encampments, there was a major focus on Palestine, as there should be. So then people who never cared about anything were like, well, what about the Congo? What about Sudan? What
Bruh.
about, whatever? So that became a take by the Dr. Umar types of the world, that y'all need to worry about Africa now, what y'all don't care about. And it was like weird discourse. A lot of this, unfortunately, was online. So for those of you who didn't catch any of that, good for you. But there was this weird discourse about anti-blackness and such. This stuff eventually gets taken up by the Democrats like later in the year to kind of try to
Hmm.
drive a wedge between people who were supporting Palestine and being concerned about Trump. But so we actually talked about the Congo and talked about, but the myth being like that was the Congo somehow, the Congo and Palestine, you can't talk about both. Like they have to be in opposition or in war with each other or something like that, right? So we had the same guest on from BAP for that, but Nick and Tunde. Then in July we did whose streets. That was because remember Ryan, we were supposed to talk about cities because that was a main function of the Laundry Black Rage in
Hmm.
chapter 3, but we never got to it. So we talked about do we really, when people say things like my city or my hood and how we don't really own these things. But we talk about like where there are streets. And then the one we were all on, possibly my favorite, I still don't know what my favorite was the one on Professor X. The myth was Professor X and Magneto are based on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Uh,
Oh
and that
man.
was that one
That was a
that
good
one
one.
we made a clip of that one. That one did pretty well.
That was a fun
Um,
episode to do.
say what?
That was just a fun episode to do.
It
Not
Yeah,
was.
even
well,
like the episode itself, but just as for people who have extensively talked about X-Men for years and just nerded out.
Yeah.
Um, it was interesting to then like bring it full circle from just shit we was kicking the shit about to like an actual full analysis for the people.
yeah, and that
I
had been
still
on the
been meaning to
list
go
for a
back and
long
check those
time.
comments just to see
Yeah.
just comments under the videos just to see who was like, no, they couldn't have
Oh,
been no.
there
Oh,
was
I
a lot
saw
of
a
people.
couple. I saw
There
a
was a lot,
couple.
Let's get it rowdy in there a little bit.
especially on
One
a
of them was
clip we
like,
made.
I could tell each one of them doesn't read comics. I'm like, nigga, shut up.
Yeah,
Like, do
yeah,
you? Do you read
I
comics?
was like,
Truly.
do you even read, nigga? But yeah.
yeah. That shit was weird. We'll come back to that. Um, the the myth, the death penalty works with M.L. Smith. That was about Marcellus Williams, who was actually executed in Missouri, even though he was clearly innocent.
Yeah,
DNA showed he wasn't there. Marcellus Khalifa Williams, excuse me.
yeah.
That
Rest in
one was
power.
tough. Yeah,
Yeah,
that one was
definitely.
tough. Cause like I did that interview and then like a few weeks later he was gone. It was wild.
Hmm.
Um,
I remember messaging you the night he was being executed. I was like, man, I don't feel right. And he's like, man, I don't
yeah,
feel
that
right.
shit, yeah, that
Yeah.
shit fucked me up. Yeah,
You're like, man, I don't feel right either. Yeah,
yeah.
that's rough.
Um, Black August is a celebration. That was a myth we did also in August with Naeem from the Pendleton 2 came on to do that. Then took a little bit of a break. I had written an article because I was getting tired of all these losers talking shit about Palestine, particularly the black liberals. And I had written a piece, and then Mamadou Tao had written a piece over at Cornell. That was a student people might have learned who was about to get deported. He's a
Hmm.
grad student at Cornell University. He's about to get deported, and because of some bullshit charges brought up by the campus, and they had to get like half the country to sign signatures to keep him from getting deported. So
Hmm.
him, myself, and Josh from Millennials Killing Capitalism did an episode on Black liberalism, Palestine, and U.S. imperialism. And I just posted that one. That
That
was in
was a good one.
September.
Chef's
Thank
kiss
you.
on that one. And
And
your article was on Monoweiss, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I think that's the only article I didn't write that many articles this year. I think I was kind of done with writing, but that was one of the few I
Hmm.
did write. Uh, So then we did the myth. This is me and Cam in October. Well, we did it in October. They released in October, November. All politics is local, primarily with it was with Dr. Felicia Deneau. I don't use the D. Felicia Deneau, and we we primarily focused on the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party
Hmm.
and how that just really much dispels any idea that all politics are quote unquote local
That was
when
a good one too.
that party
Hmm.
operated locally and statewide and was crushed by the national party. And then me and Ryan just did one, came out, two parts. One was just me and Ryan, the other one was with Max Ramo. The myth was easier to organize under Democrats. That is somehow easier to organize under Democrats. And I think it's just not fundamentally true. And as I said on our episode, if that were true, then you would have won the election. It's really not that complicated. So,
Yep.
so like
Cut and
if it
dry.
was, yeah, if it were easy to organize, then you would have won the election. You didn't win the election. So really,
Hmm.
all the other things we got into were fun, but we really didn't need to say anything beyond that.
And we'll
Um,
Hmm.
never forgive how y'all was acting a fucking fool because that bitch lost the election.
yeah,
Like,
Bruh.
I'm not fuck
Like
Palestine. I'm going back to drinking my Starbucks, you spineless mother.
Bruh.
and
Probably
then
not
no,
the people that listen to this podcast specifically, but a lot of fucking people were out there acting plumb fools. And
terrible.
we saw it.
what got me was like y'all didn't see it coming. Like that the party was so like the party was so unorganized. It felt every time I saw something from it, it felt like it was last minute and pandering, of course. And I was just like, okay, all right.
The bitch
That's because it
spent
was last
half
minute and
a
pandering.
camp. The bitch spent half a campaign telling y'all she doesn't actually need to give you anything because she's not Trump.
And she didn't give us anything at all. Like, bruh, the whole plan that she had for black men was like mentoring programs, cryptocurrency,
Crypto.
and a bunch of other bullshit. It's like, bruh, okay. All right.
And
Okay. I see where your priorities are.
that came after a lot of criticism and Obama putting his foot in his mouth when he did that little lecture about how we don't like her because she's a black woman. And I'm like, bro, we would all vote for your wife, not me. But I'm talking about generally speaking, people would have voted for your wife and have no
For
problem
her,
voting for
yeah,
a
yeah,
black woman.
definitely.
Yeah. So I'm saying that doesn't even, I mean, every poll shows this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
At least
Joe
because
would have
at least
won
she's
in a
intelligent and has
landslide.
charisma. Like,
I'm sorry, but they
oh
showed
girl.
they showed up like, oh shit, we running. Oh, it's election year. Fuck. All right.
Yeah. I mean, it was bad. I mean,
Let's hey go do this. Hey Ryan,
the
hurry up. We
Biden
got to get the
thing.
polls
Yeah.
up and stuff. Start.
Exactly.
Pam,
You're right,
record a
Terrell. It's
commercial.
like you're right, Terrell. It was like, yeah, it's your turn. Let's get in there. Get in the game.
And you held
It was
on to
like,
a corpse for you had a corpse in office for 4 years talking about Biden, and then you try to tell us it wasn't a corpse,
and they didn't even use
and
their
then
star player. They just used the bench. It's like, hey, Kamala, it's your turn. Get in there.
It's even it even drives me crazy to believe that this is just all thrown together. When in reality, there are transition plans. Like these things are thought about, planned out years in advance. Biden, even if Biden wasn't old and deadly, dying, um, they would have already had a transition plan. If he died in office, this is all of the things that take place. If you had to run, here are all the things that come next. So even the excuses of like this was last minute pissed me off too because you spend time having these conversations behind the door
Hmm.
and
but
then to show up,
they
they
didn't want
just
to do
didn't
a
want to.
primary.
They just
we
didn't want to. They wanted folks
Yeah,
to think that this was thrown together. They wanted to give us nothing. Um, and it resulted in what? Nothing.
we can move out. We can
Niggas
move
was
on
just
after this,
partying,
but
bruh.
we
Like
can
niggas
move
was
on
just
after this.
like,
But
Y'all played
like, I'm sorry.
yourselves.
Go ahead, Ryan.
no, I'm just saying niggas was just partying. They got Meg
Yeah,
Thee Stallion up there. They had Beyonce up there, Kelly Rowland. They pulled out all the stops,
Glorilla.
and at the same time, not giving us a definite plan whatsoever of what to expect for her from her administration. It's like, okay, what like Terrell said, what the fuck did you expect?
I, like I'm saying, we can move on from this because I want to get back to the episode. But honestly, I felt disrespected. Like as an American, quote unquote, American voter, I felt disrespected by it all of it all together. My intelligence was disrespected. It was just like a shit show.
As a black person, too.
I wouldn't gonna go into that part because
Nah, for
yeah.
real.
I
They
don't
got
really think about
Quavo up
myself
there.
I don't really think about myself as an American,
No, no,
but
no.
I'm
I'm not
that's
even
why that's why I
saying
say quote because like you
American,
know how it is.
but
right,
they
but.
brought Quavo up there, bro. And
Yeah,
then
it was I mean, but I guess part of me is like Terrell said, what did you expect? Some part of us has to just live with it because that's what the party is. Like some people it's like there's nothing to really be disappointed in because this party sucks and we should move on from it anyway. So it's just like
mhm,
you can utilize some local people here and there or Democrats if you need to get something done. But in general, like it's not a party that we should be really investing all of our energy in and being like disappointed that they didn't do common
Don't get
sense
it twisted. We're
things.
not on the other side either. Like
No,
fuck them too.
but
But
that's what keeps people. I mean, that was what
yeah,
we talked about in that episode with Max, with just the
Yeah.
duopoly and the binary of that, and how both sides need each other. Like you need the failure of the Democrats to uplift the Republicans. You need the crazy, like wild rhetoric and even wild policies of the Republicans to uplift the Democrats, and they have a symbiotic relationship that they feed off each other, and we just go back and forth, right? Like that's the game. But anyway, because I know Cameron has a leave, so I at least want to get her on one of these episodes. As far as a more in-depth
can I just say
conversation.
something real quick? And also, Black and I, we did that for the first time ever. Did that brainstorming episode on Patreon. We first time we ever did something like that. So I'm not sure if that's something we can continue into next year, but
Yeah, I think we should, especially on episodes like that where when we have to craft a kind of argument ourselves and we're not just interviewing somebody. I think it's definitely helpful.
right.
Um, so we'll continue to do those for folks who want to be patrons. We started this thing. Me and Cam did one for one that's not out yet, but we do like these reflection episodes, not reflection. We do kind of like a pre-production episode, like, all right, how are
Mhm.
you thinking about tackling this? What are some of the themes? What's coming to your mind? It's not the most organized episode. It's not supposed to be because it's basically just us recording a meeting of us trying to figure out how to make an organized episode. So anyway, so yeah, we did the episodes we did together were Prisons for Profit. Um, I didn't actually state this one in our list. I don't, but it was because it was done in it was done in when did that episode come out? But it was we did an episode, a constructive criticism of BPM, Black Power Media.
Oh,
And we did not put this on our audio side, so those of you who don't listen to us on YouTube don't even know what we're talking about. You probably never heard about it. If you're not into the YouTube side of our business, you don't even know what this is about. So we did that. I'll come back to that, and then we did the one on the on X-Men.
Did
That
we
was
did that this year?
which
I'm
one?
telling y'all, we lived multiple lives this year.
Bro,
Yeah, it was this year.
that was
That was like
this
at the beginning of this year. Like it was like at the end of January. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, so no, it was in February. It was like mid-February, I remember. And then we did that
Um,
Dr. James episode came out like the second half of February. But when you go to the
um,
audio side, I didn't upload it purposefully because I was like, this is not really no people
Yeah.
who don't follow the channel could care less. So I didn't put it on our audio side.
Yeah.
Um, but
I just
so
had
we did
something
all
jog my
that.
memory of when we did that.
Say what?
I just had something jog my memory of when we did that because it
Yeah.
was around February. It was cold outside, and I showed up to work super early, and that's when you sent us that letter, that email.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
Less
people
said
don't
about that, the
know, man.
better.
Okay, this one is so we'll deal with that one just for the sake of time. We can come back for those who can stick around to the other ones too, but because we only
Mhm.
did three together, so it's not like we did that many. But the prison we're probably gonna come back to, but yeah, so we did a critique of BPM, which is now has a new name as a consequence of what we did. But, but we did a constructive criticism of the channel, and for those who again don't follow, we're part of a broader channel, Black Radical Shows, that comes on YouTube, and what was formerly known as Black Power Media, that has been renamed as Black Liberation Media. Um, that and I don't really want to get too much into. Again, we're not trying to like bring up any sore spots for anybody, so I don't want to get too much into restating the criticisms, but it was primarily a lack of structure, and a lack of accountability about certain things going on behind the scenes, and and just some contradictions that were difficult to continue to watch and work through. So we did a criticism. We alerted people that we were going to do the criticism. It was not, didn't come out of nowhere. Um, upon doing said criticism, I went on to a show the next day, and me and Dr. Ball didn't have the greatest discussion, but we're cool now. For those who want to try to, create drama or whatever, we're cool. But there was definitely some
The shit
disagreements.
was funny.
Uh,
The shit was funny. I watched. I was like, damn.
it might have been the only time I wasn't like my calm, self online. Um,
Brother.
and then, and then like,
Brother, I
yelling
caught that.
shit.
I
And
caught that.
what a time.
Oh,
And then but then what we did, I just want to emphasize this part, is we actually went to meetings and we hashed a lot of these things out. So, some things we can't speak to because we are, sworn to a collective, but we are moving it towards a cooperative, some of the revenue sharing. And to be fair, there was some adjustments already being made in revenue sharing prior to our critique, but some of that revenue sharing has continued to be adjusted. Um, and some actual like structure in terms of what our actual values are, what we want to live up to, some code of conduct to deal with behavior, things of that nature. Like we built some structure, and some people who, for their own reasons, weren't really fans of that, so they moved on with their own stuff, and we wish them well. But most of the people who were on the channel still stuck around.
you
But
got
once
it
we did
out.
that episode, we didn't. Once we did that episode, we didn't talk anymore, and there were definitely moments where without again, I don't want to cause any more. Because I think we've worked a lot of things out, so I don't want to make this. I don't want to create beef. But I'm saying there were some times where, if we weren't trying, if we didn't have a plan on what we were ultimately trying
Yeah.
to do, there were definitely times where, niggas could have responded to some shit. I'll just say that. But our plan was ultimately to get everybody to the negotiating table, as they say. Our plan was to get everybody in a room to hash things out. Our plan was not to go back and forth. So that's why once we said it, y'all didn't hear nothing from us. Other people might have had something to say, and that's on them, and we're not knocking it, or it's just that's what people wanted to do. But once we said what we needed to say, we went to meetings, we had our arguments behind the scenes, we pushed back, and there was a lot of stuff, and there's still a lot of things that need to be worked out, but I'm just saying within that time, I think the channel has benefited from not just, I'm not trying to give us all the credit, but more so benefited from actually just having more open dialogue amongst each other and things not maybe being between a few individuals who are having issues figuring some things out. So now, more people come to the table. Still plenty of stuff to work out, but I think we're moving in the right direction. Um, and we opened the door for some things that had been simmering for years, to be addressed. So, um, I'll let y'all say more. I'm just trying to be very diplomatic because I know how hard it was to even get through that. So I do not want to create more beef, or any more dissension or anything like that. I'm not interested in that. But I do think it's fair, almost a year later, having been quiet, to speak some kind of say something because we really didn't do a follow up or any of that. And I don't think we should have, you know.
Yeah. I think in general, though, that episode was meant to be like, but we have seen both on our side and from other sides, that folks have tried to name issues for a while within our org, our channel, that have not been resolved, and that folks were not feeling heard. And it wasn't, I mean, even though we personally spoke on behalf of the four of us, and as a pod on the channel, that doesn't mean that we're the only people who have ever thought that or felt that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and so the same way in which we go about any episode of being like, we want to create a space where folks feel informed, where folks feel like when they step into spaces to have conversations, they have better tools to go about having conversations on all of the topics we discuss. Um, that this was another one, right? And one thing that we did that I think is the most important part, like you said, is like not only did we tell folks that this is what was coming, be like we tried to do this behind closed doors, it wasn't working. Here we are. But also we stuck around to see it through and we struggled
Yeah, that part. Yeah.
within our community, as a channel. We sat in meetings where folks did not agree. We took constructive criticism on our own end. We stepped into the space seeking resolution. Even when we said it in our episode, like we're not just here to be petty and talk shit. Like we want to see change so that way we can have a larger impact as a collective because we value and we believe in what we're doing and what our channel is doing. And yeah, of course, some petty shit comes out of that because people are humans and feelings are
Right.
feelings and all that shit. And people got upset and people were mad and the meetings were not always, productive. Sometimes it was
Right.
just
And I
niggas
feel
getting
like
upset.
for me, and we talked about this before we did it, was like we knew we were gonna get some smoke. The way it came, we weren't particularly expecting, but we knew we were gonna get some smoke. And I feel like if you step into that, if you're gonna do a criticism, no matter how valid or principled you think you are,
Be
if
ready
you're gonna
for it.
do it, yeah, you gotta be ready. You can't like play victim and be like, oh my God. Like you can get mad like everybody else, but I don't think it's fair to, they say throw a stone and hide your hand. So even
Yeah.
though, I think we did it in a way as principled as we could, and that's people can debate that however they want. But I do think it would have been weak had we done that and then just bounce
Yep.
like a lot of folks do, you
And
know.
we stayed, we stuck around, we sat in meetings constantly, email chains. And one thing above all that I'm grateful for, that we knew existed even before We gave the critique, which is why we chose to give the critique to begin with, because we just felt like it wasn't going to work out, that there was no chance of success. We would have just dipped. We would have figured it out on our own. But we knew that there was potential there and that sometimes folks need a push. And I think how we showed up to the space allowed others to step into it without a ton of defensiveness. Again, humans are humans. Niggas got feelings. Um, but as a collective, we came together, we hashed it out, we struggled through it, we came up with new boundaries and agreements and movements of how we wanted to move forward. And ultimately, y'all gonna see this on YouTube, so we still in the channel. Um, which means that there was a lot of success that came out of it, and it was worth it. It was worth the constant, you know, back and forth in Zooms and weeding out the folks that wasn't really down for it. And I think it sets um, an example that we already saw previously. Like when we talk about folks who are like, we're not our ancestors, da, 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 da. Niggas have always struggled through in orgs. Folks have
Yeah.
always
Yep.
not always seen eye to eye. Folks have always had different ideologies, and the success that came out of so many orgs before us, is because there were plenty of niggas who were willing to call out the parts that weren't working and sit there and struggle collectively to make it better. And whether it
Mhm.
lasts a lifetime or it lasts a short period, that is how things keep moving. And so it's not like we did anything that is just so beyond scope that that's never been done before. Um, we followed playbooks that came before us, and hopefully for anybody who saw it, who went through it, who was in similar spaces, who might not know where to start or how to go about it, I hope that what we did set an example. And even though folks don't get to see everything that we talked about and all of the things that happen behind closed doors, even the ways in which we went about it, I hope at least sets a tone for like other folks to feel empowered to step up and to speak up and to call people in, not just calling niggas out. And whatever collective groups and orgs and spaces that you're in that might need some improvement.
Mhm. Yeah,
No, well said for sure.
that whole episode and even the even the outcome of that episode, that was a learning experience for me. It was exercise in patience and learning to struggle with a collective to come out with to reach some kind of consensus, you know. Now I'm a patient person, but this was on a different level. This was like to actual struggle along with a collective of people. And
Woo!
I'm thankful for this experience, to be quite honest with you, because it shows, even though it was difficult, and we know we were going to get some smoke after this episode, it showed that we can achieve together, that we can actually come up with some objectives and actually achieve them. And you know, people who didn't want to be a part of the collective, like Cam said, were able to weed themselves out. But um, it was beautiful seeing everybody trying to struggle and be on one accord. And I'm thankful for that episode because going forward, I can take what I learned from that whole experience, being a part of BLM, Black Liberation Media, and even apply it to if we need organizing on a small scale or even on a big scale, or some of the stuff that we do for like the Pilsen too, or going whatever we decide to do. And yeah, I'm really I'm really happy with the outcome. And there's still progress to be made, but I'm really happy with the outcome after that episode.
Yeah, I'm literally just mirroring everything that you guys said. I'm happy with the progress and everything. And like we said earlier, to the ones that did, weed themselves out of the group, yo, blessings to you. We wish you
And
the
I
best. And
real quick,
go ahead.
real no, just in addition to that, we talk about people left, but we also were able to bring people back. Like we didn't do it ourselves, but I think our
Oh
actions
yeah.
provided the
Yes,
conditions for
yes.
people, like particularly Dr. CVS and Dr.
Yes.
Layla, to come back to the channel. I think that was a good addition. Again, I don't want to take too much credit. Like we didn't reach out to them or anything, but I do think the struggles that we engaged in made them feel more comfortable about wanting to come back. So just wanted to add that. Go ahead.
No, no, I appreciate you adding that because that was a big thing, and I'm glad that they are back. Shout out to them. Um, but like I was saying, yo, to the people that left, yo, we do wish you the very best. Only because I mean, whether we agree with why you left or agree with your point of view or disagree with that, whatever, we're all here on YouTube trying to push our message out, and that's to help our people. So I don't we can have contention, back in, behind the scenes and everything, but still, we wish you the best or whatever because you're pushing a message that we hope to get, out to everyone. And I'm just happy to be able to be a part of this growing pain that it was like doing the episode and now everything that happened behind the scenes and everything, and that we're as much as we can being transparent with our audience because, you know, at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all, we got our feelings and everything, but we believe in what we're saying and what we're putting out into the world, and we want to make sure we're putting the best message out there, and we have the best people to do that, and that we're organized in a way where we can do that as effectively as possible as a channel. And I would even propose that not this year, maybe in a year, maybe next, but not the recap for 2025, but 2026 recap. Maybe we do another critique of the channel and see where we're at from there, so that our audience is engaged with our growth and our progress. And because I mean, y'all interact with us. Some of y'all donate. Some of y'all, join in the Patreon and everything. And I think y'all enjoy that growth and that progression, and know that the potential of this channel can be the forefront of what we want for Black media one day.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of potential to do that, and people are going to come and go, but at least the people coming in will know where we're at and what we're moving towards. And hell, you never know about the future. We just want to make sure we're setting a good foundation and something to build off of that can project us into the future to make sure our message is getting pushed out there to, I don't want to sound corny about it, but help liberate and educate our people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but we part of it, and we said this at the beginning, was what we believed in the channel. It's it might be one of the if it's one of the few channels at maybe because been the split that occurred. Some of the people watch both channels, so regardless how I feel about the other side of the split, I don't want to get into that. But I'm saying people watch what they watch, so I'm saying like, but we're one of the few. But we were one of the few then, and still one of the few now channels on YouTube that are like black led, have a primarily black audience and a black left all at the same time. It's very rare. And there's a lot of marginalization that occurs because of that. There's definitely more lucrative opportunities we could seek out. We could go be the token black lefty, whatever, the token black progressives in some white space and probably make a lot more money
Yeah.
if that's what we wanted to do. Plenty of people have chosen that route. So, so
My soul is worth a little bit more. Thank you.
yeah. So I'm saying, but I'm saying like that. But there's a uniqueness to the channel because most of YouTube is not. It's just not, it doesn't work. Like it doesn't have, and then not only to just be, it's one thing to be that in message, but also to have like the actual on ground connections that we have to people doing work, and the people who want to come on because they're doing work, not just Black Myths podcast, but the overall channel is unique despite all the other challenges and contradictions and flaws and problems that we pointed out in that episode. That still is something that we value and want to help build up. So we weren't looking to leave. And if we would have left, if that was the goal, we wouldn't have even done a criticism. We would have just left.
Yeah.
That was like kind of the internal debate anyway, for those who may not know. So there was no kind of
Facts.
like, we weren't going to like, again, if you're going to shoot at a nigga, I think you got to stay, you got to face him down. You don't get to drive by and just run away. That's not really how I like to approach it. So,
Not how we operate.
um, say what?
But that's not how we operate, no way.
Nah. So I
We
think
don't do
that was,
drive-bys. We walk out, hop out, and walk up,
Walk ups.
walk up on them.
No, last thing I'm gonna say is I do appreciate the channel. And yo, shout out to y'all for the work that we have done and continue to do and the progress that we are making. It is tough and goddamn, the shit is hectic, but together we'll push through it, we'll get through it, and we'll have a better channel for our audience. So shout out to
Yeah.
y'all.
Yeah, and I mean there's still things to work out, and I think those things can be worked out. But I also think, and I know there was some disagreement on whether we're an organization or not, and I don't want to, again, I'm doing my best to not respond to things, but I do want to say anytime people come together to do something as a collective, you are some kind of organization. You may not be a political organization, but anytime, I can't say a specific amount of people, I would say two or three, as they say in the Bible or something, but like wherever two, three gather. But I'm saying like I would
Yeah.
say when people come together and they are going to share a space and share resources and share time and share all those things that there you are some form of an organization. Now, what type of organization you are is up to how you want to discuss it. Like, so when we talked about the tyranny of structurelessness, that was a piece we quoted from in that episode. Because a lot of folks will just be like, it's just a vibe, and we just kind of figure it out as we go. And that's all good until people have different understandings of things, and you have nothing in place to work through those different understandings, and then you run into some real issues. And, it's one thing if it's just the four of us, even maybe you can get away with that to some extent because there's just four people. But when you have, as our channel, like I just saw an email, there was 10 shows listed and that wasn't even everything. When you have all those different personalities and some shows have multiple people on them, most of them actually have multiple people. And that's just anything. This isn't even a criticism of us. I'm just saying like anything that comes together where you have to decide money, you have to decide who's going to be on the screen. You have to
Yeah.
decide who's going to talk, who's not going to talk. You have to decide all these things. You are some form of some kind of organization, whether you want to be or not. So the principles that you choose to work through that organization is up to you and up to that collective. But you don't put groups of people in a room and act like you're not part of something. Now, like again, the formation can be up to you, but you can't really deny the reality of the fact that you're in a formation. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, you
if you
can't even
want,
put a random group of black people in one room and them not form different groups or anything to say, oh, well, we're this or we're that. They're
True.
gonna organize in some kind of way. Like
yeah,
We can
it
barely
just
decide what we want to eat half the time, so let's stop.
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Like, you know,
Facts. Facts.
yeah. Like it's just, so I'm just saying there's just an inevitable conflict that it comes when people are working together. Now, if you want to be an individual, isolated, that's up to you. But I'm just saying there's no scenario where, I mean, we've all been in different stuff, and it doesn't all have to be political. But even if you're, like Cam does a book club, for instance, obviously that's not the same as being in BAP or some big more political org, but you still got to have something like what time we go meet,
Hmm.
yeah, what book are we reading? Does this
Hmm.
book
There's
really
some
fit what this
organization and some
group?
structure behind
Yeah,
it. Some, there's I don't want to say rules, but there's some things that you have set in place to make sure that the meetings of the book club are successful and that everyone's getting what they're supposed to get out of the book club.
yeah. So, so part of our critique wasn't that the channel should be a political org or not. I mean, obviously we lean more towards that, but it was also just like there just needs to be more protocols in place in general to kind of work through certain things. And when it's just personality based, you just run into some challenges because personalities are personalities and people have their ideas of how things are going. So when we have a sheet of paper that we've agreed to, or some kind of a guidelines that we agreed to, then it's just harder for folks to be on their own vibe. Now, getting folks to follow what's on paper, getting people to actually respect rules and respect people's space is a whole
That's a
other
different thing.
science that still needs that we are still working out. And that's not even criticism of the channel. That's just anything and everything. We all know just because you write down a rule doesn't mean people are just going to follow it, right? Like that's not how it
Hmm.
works. But so buy-in and getting people to care is its own science. But I'm just saying there's always going to be some kind of struggle, and this is why I think a lot of things fail for black folks sometimes is because there's this sense that we all just share all these same things. until, we get in deep with it. And it's like sometimes not even really that deep. And we're like, oh, it's a lot of different whatever going on because we didn't want to have that conversation. We didn't really, because people thought it wasn't useful for time. It was going to drag things out. And then when you get in a critical moment and now you just are, now you have to rely on the personality or something because that's the only thing that really can move the ball, right? Like it's the only thing that can move the bar. So that's all I really had to say on that, just in terms of thinking about organizational questions. I think this year in general, beyond the channel, definitely had me thinking a lot more organizationally because I've had to lead more stuff and be at the forefront of more things and just thinking about all the different things you got to do to struggle and knowing different personalities and how do you get folks to buy in but still hold a certain principle line. You really got to let go of your ego sometimes
Hmm.
because people gonna say a lot of shit you don't like, but you got to realize like what's the North Star, and it's not necessary for me to go at this person because I might win that argument like me and Ryan were talking about in the Democrat organizing on the Democrats. You might win your little argument. You might defeat the person who you think is dumb, but you might need that nigga though. So if you just totally
Right.
well on them, they can't come back. So like
Right.
or you might alienate other people because you just wanted to go in on that one person. So you have to understand how to move in a way that respects the space you're in if the goal is to get something done versus just being like, I don't like this or I don't like that and just kind of
Hmm.
throwing a fit about it. That doesn't necessarily lead to a good outcome, and it can just escalate drama that doesn't have to be escalated. Like some drama really don't have to have, most of it, in my opinion, doesn't
Yeah.
really have to get to the point it gets to if people would just be like, I don't really have to respond to this nigga. I don't
Yeah.
Yeah, and
really have to take it.
I believe he stated in one of those episodes that, you have to decide whether you want to be right or do you want to organize toward liberation. And
Yeah.
sometimes, like you said, you're going to have to put your ego aside and really think what we can do collectively to achieve a certain goal, and that you can't do it without organization. You have to have, a most chart. You're going to have people, leading certain projects or whatever the case may be. You have to have certain objectives that you need to be reached, and everybody has a particular talent and a particular skill to contribute, and you need to be able to pinpoint those talents and utilize people's talents and skills effectively. So it's just part of what we're doing. It's part of the life we chose. It is what it is, and you really can't get around it because you have to have organization.
Yeah. And not everything is gonna fit everybody's needs or priorities or thoughts. And so then
Hmm.
you also have to leave room for folks to choose one of two things. Either this is not compromising my morals and it's just really me needing to compromise and chill out on my ego, and so I'm willing to fold. Or folks are like, whether it's for or they're just like, you know what, actually, my ego runs me and I don't like this and I want to be the boss of things. And then they leave.
Diallo. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
And
I just let
so
this.
Oh God,
I
I'm
think
gonna
at the
I'm gonna
end of
wrap
the
this up after
day,
Cam.
at the end of the day got to end. And I'm glad to say that it was worth it. It was 100% worth it. We would do it again. We would still stand 10 toes down, and say what we say and mean what we mean. Um, and
Hmm.
hopefully we won't have to do it again. But if so, we'll still step into the ring, uh, with us from a space of wanting collective win.
Yeah.
But not last thing we'll say is just like I think we have to be able to divide like what is worth moving the needle to a goal versus what is just a petty thing you want to resolve that does not move it anywhere. So there are plenty of petty things that y'all don't understand how petty we actually are when the camera's not on and it's in a group chat where petty is shit. I'm not ashamed to say that, but we understand that those things in a group of four people who understand each other, you can say what you want in that specific moment, but that does not necessarily need to be aired out online or aired out in whatever space you're in because it does not help move the needle forward. Now, everybody has different opinions of what moves the needle forward, and that is just something that gets resolved in struggle. So I'm not saying there's a definite thing, but there are some things I know for a fact, and I think I'm not alone in that this is not going to be helpful, even if it makes me feel wonderful. There are names I would like to call people. There are things I would love to say about certain folks that are not helpful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that episode, we didn't do any of that other than one little joke that Terrell got off, and that was funny. But it's like we didn't do any of that, like, man, this old Rick, this old gig face looking ass nigga. Like we didn't do none of that, right? Like we took a very like we try to like keep it above board and deal with the actual material that we wanted to push and not all this other stuff. So I'll just say that to close that out. Like I hope people learn. I'm not saying we did that perfectly. I'm sure that if I watched it again, there's things we would do differently. But I just hope people learn that like you don't have to unload your clip every time. You just don't. So like
No, to
it's
bring it back
okay.
to
So on to prisons for profit. Um, so that episode was I don't know, that was a good way to open the year because that was a strong I think that was a strong series. And I know Cam had been demanding we do something in that realm forever, despite all the prison episodes that we've done. But Cam had been demanding that we do something in that realm. So that one was interesting because it was like it was more research. I remember telling y'all like I think we were supposed to do two parts, and I was like, yo, there's no way all the different
yeah.
shit that we had uncovered. I was like, there's no way. We actually had to chop it up and deal
Yeah.
with the Ruthie and the what's the Golden Gulag book and all of that in part two. Because part
Didn't we
one was
rewatch what was it, 13 or something?
13th,
The
yes, and we
documentary, yeah.
we tore that to shreds, yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Oh, okay, I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We went in on that shit.
but this episode I know for a fact has been used. I know we use it in BAP once, and it's been used by multiple people to like teach or on this subject. Like people have sent me their syllabi on that series of episodes. Like so, I know this one really was helpful for folks because this is a myth that even the best, most well-meaning people tend to repeat often and where it's all about the money and it's like it's a part of it but it's like if you reduce it to that you miss some of the other things happening because you think it's just about prisons making money off of people's bodies but like Ruthie said the main real exchange is not labor but it's time
Yeah.
you know that it's the literal time that you're taking from people.
I think we went into it where it was like it's the whatever profit, if there is any, which I think you said earlier, they operate at a deficit, so it's not really a profit, or not a profit at all. Um, if there is, I mean, it doesn't make up till if it does make up any percentage, it's less than 10% of what actually is going on
Yeah,
and what actually is, the prison
yeah.
system and our justice system and whatnot.
And
To
there's plenty
restate a few numbers,
for
just
it.
and then I'll let Cam go. Like 7 to 8% of prisons are privately owned, so that means 92 to 93, 90%. Let's just say round it up. Prisons are publicly governmentally owned. So there's that. Um, I think Ori said a good thing when me and Karen were talking to him about people don't understand the difference between revenue and profit.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
there's revenue that's generated, but not necessarily profit,
Profit.
right?
Yeah.
So just giving people that. So most prisons are not privately owned. There are private entities that latch themselves on to prisons because everything that goes into a prison, from building it to, giving the infrastructure it needs inside, probably comes from some private entity. But people don't say schools and basically every governmental building, every bureaucratic thing is built solely for like the driving reason behind it is profit. But just
Can
to giving
you
people so people understand like what the original argument was, they didn't hear that. But go ahead, Cam.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna reiterate, like, we never said that prisons don't make money. Um, but it is nothing in comparison to the deficit that it's ran at, and it's nothing in comparison to the real error and the real crime, which is the amount of time taken away from individuals, from their families, from communities. And even like when we talked about it. And we talked about the numbers, right? And we
Hmm.
talked about how what Core Civic in like 2018 made like $482 million, like their CEOs, which is one of the largest private prison companies in the United States. But that was nothing in comparison. And that's a lot of money. So I'm not saying that's nothing because obviously I don't got no millions. And to make $482 million off the backs of bodies and people being locked away is a huge deal. But there was like 11, almost 12 billion that just the state of California has spent in that same year to run the prison. Um, and so I think like when we look at, like Black was just talking about, the difference between revenue and profit, um, the real monster within all of this is at its core, like the ways in which the state is stealing people. But when you want to talk about numbers and money, it is the amount of smaller, a lot, especially now, a lot of tech entities. And we talked about this just last week, or a few weeks ago, whenever we did the body cam video that y'all will see video eventually. Um, in that episode of like the ways in which other corporations and companies align themselves with the federal government in order to profit, like that is also a different layer of horror. And that is where a lot of like money itself is being made off the phone. Anybody who's ever had a family member, friend, cousin, whatever, community member,
Bruh.
y'all know them calls not cheap. And that used to not really be a thing, or their ability to learn. And so we talked in that episode about how, one, even though this episode wasn't about prison not reforming anybody, and we've already discussed that in previous ones, but, you know, even the ability to bring in programming is no more because it actually was costing them too much, not just from a space of costing them and as a result of like folks rioting and continuing to speak out against the injustices that take place behind those prison walls, but just even the money was running them in such a deficit that a lot of it was then being pulled out.
Lock them away and erase them like they've never existed, And then if they're fortunate enough to be released, they're kind of relegated to a status that's less than second class citizen. And, you know, there is a power aspect when it comes to prison, like everybody else said, it's not necessarily making a profit, but it is maintaining the power of the state and exercising that power amongst, against, I should say, all the people. And that's all I wanted to say about that episode.
Yeah. Or you want to say something, Kim, and then I can close out.
Oh, no, I think the last thing when it came to profit that we really wanted,
Mhm.
that we really stamped was how um the narrative that a ton of like prison labor is being used for the country. And while that does happen in some places, um, it's not like a driving force, as we talked
Mhm.
about during that episode, because of the need for like increased security for that. And so how that always like trumps production. And so companies don't view it as lucrative because it's a liability. And I just wanted to bring that up because we had talked about Naeem Trotter talking to us about how, the prison jobs like led to folks, one, clashing against each other, and two,
Mm,
there was a lot more organizing that can take place when you're not necessarily just in your block. And so they didn't want to always allow large amounts of people for the very scarce amount of jobs, they would use it as like a carrot being hung over people's heads
yep.
Mhm.
and leverage it to then steal it back. And so it wasn't something that is a well-oiled machine the way that we would think. And although plenty of things in this country are still being made with prison labor, and
Mhm.
that's not a lie, it is not something that is so lucrative to where, they would actually utilize it on a mass scale the way that I think sometimes it's being projected. And in ways I think even I believed. Um, because overall, it doesn't make them any money in the long run. It just creates more of a liability. And if there's anything companies hate, is a liability.
Yeah, and I think something we didn't say, and I think some one of my labor friends said, I think is a good point to make on in relation to that is companies similar to that as corporations and capitalists have used throughout time in different eras, they will always use a population of people who they don't have to pay hardly anything to undermine their general labor force.
Yeah.
So prisoners can be used to undermine the general labor force. A very small portion of prisoners that might get outsourced to do a job can be used to undermine the labor force that could do that, obviously for more money because they don't have any rights or something of
Mm,
that nature. So that can be done, but what we're saying is the driving thing behind prisons isn't locking up a bunch of people so you
Yeah.
can put them to work. Like that part, when you look at the numbers, just doesn't really bear out. Most people don't work jobs that are outsourced to corporations. Most of the jobs people work in prisons are like the jobs that just keep the prisons running. So that's why when Ruthie says the time, they extract the time from people and then they give them something to do with their time and to mop the floors or to work in the kitchen or something
All
to
right.
keep to run the prisons because the prisoners don't want to pay top end labor to keep the prisons running. And this is why we know prisons have such horrid conditions in many cases because you don't have enough medical staff, you have the prisoners doing a lot of the labor there. You don't want to pay staff as much as you can because you're trying to keep costs low. But that's not
mm,
because there's some business that's trying to make money. It's just like Cam said, security is the primary thing. So if you give too many niggas jobs, they might feel too big in the head and they might just take this shit over anyway. So you never want to give too many people jobs like that. I'm talking about jobs that make minimum wage or above, because most prison jobs, like jobs that are about the prison, you don't even make minimum wage. It's like being a server or
Pennies on the
something.
dollar.
Yeah,
yeah.
See,
it's
I
nothing.
think I think the thing about that episode that affected me the most, mainly because I had people, still got people, that are locked up now. And like you said, the phone calls and everything to where it's like, hey, the prison might not be quote unquote profitable or, but that's still money coming out of my pocket to pay for a phone call to take care of my
Yeah.
loved ones. How many people across America are doing that? And how many contracts are being signed with prisons to, you know, uh, what one company, Securitas or whatever it is, and you can edit that out or whatever. But, they're across like so many different prison systems, jail systems even, to where it's like, okay, putting money on the phone calls and everything, video calls. And
Commissary, stamps.
bro, it is, oh my God. And then don't get me started on like you can send care packages, right? So that means if there's a company that's curating care packages, holiday care packages, hey, send your loved one incarcerated, this, that, and the third for this. And bro, I wish I had the website because I looked at one. They have ramen like care packages and just it's funny, but it's not funny. You know what I'm saying? Like if you look at the
Right.
website, like this shit's funny, but it's not funny because like that's where we're talking. I think that's where we need to focus on when it comes to like the money part of it. Because like you said, the prisons are not profitable, but the businesses operating outside the prisons or you know
The
operating on
vendors,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
they're
know
uh
leeches.
yeah,
hmm,
They're
yeah,
leeches. They
they
now
are.
they're making the money. Now I don't know if there's a thing of them kicking back to the prison to make sure that
well,
they can
it's
continue.
just
But yeah,
any public private, and again, I think that the public private thing is an episode I might bring Russell on to talk about one day because I think that binary is bullshit. But I'm just saying, any
it
public
really is
private,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
these
But I'm
companies
saying
are
like.
in the prisons whether they're public or private. So
But if you're a company, this is why this is why these things don't get cut because like whether we're talking about prisons, police, military budgets, like we talked about in that body cam episode that will be coming out next month probably,
yeah,
there's there's a guaranteed budget that is extracted from taxpayers that then needs to be paid out to do the actual jobs of whatever they want, right? So you need equipment, you need a building, you need whatever. So that's why, when they talk about small government or something, it's like in theory, you think getting rid of wasteful government spending would be good, but that's just propaganda. They're never going to get rid of it because too many people make
Yeah.
money off of this shit. Like
right.
there's a
Mm,
whole bureaucratic class of people that make money and then they build relationships with these quote unquote private sector folks and they give the contracts out and et cetera. And that's what private prisons do, even though that gets a lot of scrutiny. They're a small portion of it. But like Terrell says, you have your phone calls, you have the people that make the food, You have all these different things, the commissary taxes, all the different shit. J-Pay, for those who know what I'm
Hmm.
talking about, when you want to send somebody a message and you got to pay for
Oh,
messages. The apps when the prisoners want to use the use a
you
tablet or
thought
something,
what was
you
it
got
back
to
in the
pay to
Books.
day
listen to
with the
music. Yeah.
what was it back in the day when you had the church cell phones and all that? You just pay 50 cents for a text. Try JPay.
Yeah.
Try JPay.
So
Especially
there's a
That
lot
shit
of
gets
there's a lot of money attached to it that people,
Hmm.
but it's like, but it's that's how the government in capitalism works, where the government, creates these jobs that companies can then attach themselves onto to make money. But our point was that those companies come in after the initial ground is
back.
laid.
Hmm.
Like
Yep.
they come in and say, okay, how can you have some excess shit that the government can't do itself? How can we come in and make some money? But when you look at the grand pie, like we laid out, $182 billion a year is spent, on mass incarceration, and you're talking about a very small amount comes out of any of these companies. Where you're talking about bail bondsmen, where you're talking about like it's small, it's not even close to the 182 billion that is spent per year, because
Yep.
Hmm.
ultimately it's a bunch of people that you don't have any jobs for, anything for. It's a surplus population. So prison becomes the most, as Ruthie points out, it becomes the consensus that everybody thinks is a solution to these problems, not giving them jobs, not investing in their neighborhoods, none of that. And then it becomes a form of national oppression against black folks, against Africans in the United States. And that's how, like Ryan said, you get to the counterinsurgency of it all, because before you even get to see the spark of what we call mass incarceration, like Joy James says, there's political incarceration. There was an increase of people in the streets who were fighting against the state that now end up in prison. And
Yep.
Ori points that out in his book in 1972. That was the peak of so-called prison riots and uprisings that had been seen at the nation at any point, because a lot of those people are now inside prison, right? So
Hmm.
it serves a many different functions. And again, I don't want to do the episode again, so I just tell people to go listen to that part three. But I think we did a great job of just laying it all out. And I mean, it's one of the ones I listen back to. I don't always listen back to shit we do. Sometimes I don't even think about it until we do these end of the year episodes. But that's one of the ones I actually go back to. Last episode, then we'll get out of here, that we did together was was probably, like I said, I still don't know what my favorite was, but it was the episode that what was the actual wording of that? I can't find where did I put my document? Oh, well, it's in the chat. But
Oh,
hold on.
that Professor X and Magneto are based on MLK and Malcolm X.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Um, so
that
that
was
one,
the part.
that was
say what?
interesting.
That was fun to rip apart. It also is a little sad in hindsight to think about. We all talked about how like this was not something that we were super aware of as folks who've
Mm-mm.
enjoyed the X-Men for a long time. And there's a ton of other themes throughout the comics and the movies and the shows that are really positive. And we're not sitting here, we didn't in the episode, we're not saying it now like shitting on the entirety of the X-Men universe and that it's just completely useless. Um, but that myth made no sense to begin with for us, and to then dive deeper into it and recognize the ways in which it was really just some like they were written out and based around fucking Zionists were wild. That
Yeah. I
Bro,
think
it took a
the
left turn for me. That shit was,
we were all
bro.
like,
yeah,
wait, what the
I
fuck?
think it, I think it
That
it
was
was
part.
like
fun.
it feels good to say like it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, it was based on Malcolm X and Martin Luther King,
I feel better that way.
two different sides of the same coin, fighting for the different struggle and all that. And he's going for this and he believes in this, but they in the same cause. And then to actually do the research and everything behind it, and it's like, the fuck,
Yeah, it was. I mean,
bro. That
for those who didn't watch it, I would
So,
definitely say go watch, because people our goal, literally when I sent this in the chat, let's do a fun myth for once. we'll still approach it like a serious episode, like we do our research and everything. But it was like ultimately this would be a little bit lighter hearted. It was in the middle of summer. All had a lot going on. So let's do a lighter myth.
And turn into a
Be-
serious one.
yeah, because like we didn't know about the Zionist thing. I'll get to that, but like we were just like, okay, this whole Malcolm X professor or a whole Malcolm X Martin Luther King Magneto Professor X, we've all seen the memes and heard
Yeah.
people talk about it, and it's even played up in the movies, and you'll hear even the actors as we played out in that episode in some of those movies, particularly the X-Men First Class phase of Marvel would talk about how it's about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all of that. So as we laid out, I think the first point was they're white. So really, like for us, that was like that's like, like they're, they're white people. So them being based on it, they're white. Like so it doesn't hold up on that part first. Just they're white.
Yeah.
Uh but but we're like, all right, that'd be kind of it's just we're gonna get in the comics, we're gonna make some distinctions about why this doesn't hold up and do some history on the comics and how like even the original characters weren't even built the way they were. And we thought we'd be out. So I'm like we're looking through and I'm reading an interview of Chris Claremont, who is really the guy that makes X-Men interesting.
Yeah.
Because when it first came out, as we talked about in the episode, it really wasn't that interesting. And then he's like, "Yeah, I based Magneto off of Menachem Ben Yakum,
Doesn't
who's
even
the
matter because he's a piece of shit. So who cares if we get his name right?
who
Devil.
who was who
Devil.
was this who was the sixth prime minister of Israel." And then and who
Wow.
founded the Likud party that Netanyahu is now the head of. And
Mm.
he said, but he thought of it as a good character arc as a guy who was a terrorist, who then went on to become the the leader of Israel. And then I read further, and that Professor X is based off the first prime minister of Israel, and I was just like, oh. So
It
so
was
so
wild.
That was
and
wild.
that was in the midst of it's like if we had done that episode even like 3 years ago, it would have been gross. But the fact that it was happening literally while people were being bombed and destroyed and ethnically cleansed, like literally while this is happening in a full in its most accelerated mode ever since maybe since 1948, possibly this is
Mm.
happening. And we're like, oh, this just got real serious all of a sudden.
Yeah.
No
So
longer a little fun episode.
yeah,
For
it was
Honestly,
like
I'm a little
Just trying to
surprised it's
talk
still.
some shit.
I'm a little surprised we ain't getting no flagged or nothing for it.
me too,
Same,
honestly.
same, same.
Like I was like, nigga,
And it's
when
crazy,
like when the shit was going on the news, and I was like, they got to pull this fucking episode. All right, we gonna deal with
bro.
that shit. We gonna get kicked off of YouTube.
It's,
All right, fuck.
it's so crazy because, like Black said, we did not expect to find that these two characters are based off of Zionists, and to
Mhm.
find the information at the time when there's so much, there's some up, there's encampments and protests happening on college campuses across the nation for Palestine. It just seemed like everything kind of fell into place with this episode. Also, the fact that saying that Professor X and Magneto were based off of MLK and Malcolm X is like such an insult to their legacies. It's
Yeah.
kind of it's kind of crazy that people took that and ran with it, you know. But I mean, Hollywood media
Trash.
Yeah, to
trash.
restate the names, I know remember when I read in the comments, people like you do not owe these people correct names. I just want to say the names so people can look them up, not because I give a shit about whether I say their names right.
True
So
that.
Professor X was supposed to be David Ben-Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel, who literally was involved in expelling people. And then Magneto was based on Menachem Begin, who was further to the right than David Ben-Gurion, and was literally terrorizing folks and was part of an openly terrorist organization. Not I'm not even talking about from our perspective. Like, no, they called that's what they were for even liberals would call them that. Um, and that's the guy that, yeah. So that's what it ended up going. Um, so I mean
It,
the just to give a little history, David Ben-Gurion is how you eventually get the ID. Like he helped found like what's we now call the IDF. Uh,
hope
and
he's going
again,
to hell
yeah, and then
burning.
Menachem is the guy who gives us the Likud party that Benjamin Netanyahu runs right now. So y'all can look into the history of those folks, but that's just, but again, just to think that that was, like we said, the real internal conflict of X-Men to get kind of the story was like, oh, this is really a liberal Zionist versus, right-wing Zionist approach, where the liberal Zionist approach was supposed to be, even though I think that's totally collapsed if it ever had a point, was that we can, we're going to be on top, but we can live next to the enemy, as in the Palestinians and the general Middle East. And then the perspective of Magneto or, Minyakum would be, no, we need to expand and annihilate. And this is all our shit. And we don't have to share any space with them because they all want to kill us because we know part of the Zionist narrative is perpetual victimhood. No, never are they the oppressors, just perpetual victimhood. So X-Men literally speaks to that kind of perpetual victimhood. So I don't think Claremont met this on purpose explicitly because when you talk design, and some of them really do be so caught up on this shit, they really buy into the victimhood, but it doesn't hold up. And it's sad because X-Men is actually not that bad overall. It's actually good overall, like when you're just watching it as a kid or you're just watching it as a comic book fan or whatever. But like Ryan said, the
Fucking loved
Malcolm
X-Men.
X, yeah,
I
the
loved it.
Malcolm,
And here
but
we
we
go.
ruined Malcolm X, or we not Malcolm, we ruined X-Men for a lot of people. Like people literally
Yeah,
told me that, like,
yeah. I'm one of them. I'm not gonna watch this shit the same anymore. I'm still gonna enjoy it, but like that episode is gonna pop up in my mind and be like, okay,
I mean, it also was this episode that it shows you even when you're not trying, just the importance of doing your research.
and then
You know,
personally, it kind of like, as far as Magneto, it kind of comparing him to Malcolm X kind of ignores the growth of Malcolm X, in my opinion. But that's
yeah, and I think even without design, this thing, like even if we
Yeah.
didn't know, even if that wasn't a thing, I don't think it holds up regardless. Because like one, both of them, both Professor X and Magneto use violence, so like the analogy doesn't really hold up anyway. Professor X literally has niggas called the X-Men who go out and fight. Now, most of their violence was, what I'm saying,
Right.
so it doesn't like Martin Luther King had nothing of such, like nothing even not
I'm
even
sorry,
within even
Martin Luther
analogy.
King didn't have an
Yeah.
X jet.
Like, like it doesn't.
I'm not about to play with you. I'm not about to
I'm
play with
sorry, bro. Where was Martin Luther King operating out of primarily? Just somebody say
Atlanta.
that real quick.
Atlanta,
Atlanta.
yeah, Atlanta.
Yeah.
Martin
you.
Luther King did not
Black
have an
Mecca.
X jet landing on Peach Street, picking niggas up to go march to.
I'm
No, it
starting to
doesn't.
see
No.
Lord,
spaceships in Bankhead.
that's not this
Like,
year. That was last year. That was
Yo,
last
Ryan's
year.
stupid.
But I will never, ever, ever forget our Atlanta episode.
Oh yeah, we roasted that
Man,
I'm
city.
so glad that at the
was that
time we
was
were
that
not.
this year or last year?
That was
that was
last
last year.
year.
Yeah,
But
Can we redo it? Shit.
because remember it was just the three of us. It was
we don't
like,
need to do
Yeah,
yeah,
it
I was
again.
finishing my book. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to do
Oh,
it again. And I'm very glad that we don't put bloopers and shit because the sheer foolishness that was Ryan that whole entire episode, there was enough foolishness that made it into the episode, but the amount of niggatry that y'all didn't get to
No, that's because Ryan had went to Atlanta that year.
rare form.
Ryan went to Atlanta that year for, was it somebody's bachelor party or
yeah, it was
like,
my homeboy Scoot's bachelor party.
yeah, he went to Atlanta that year. So he got to experience the fuckery in person, full effect.
Oh, it was a lot of fuckery.
Yeah, so that's why he came in guns blazing.
yeah, I wasn't in that episode, and it's probably better because I mean,
Right in the book.
I had to
You have
edit that
enough hatred for
episode.
Atlanta yourself, though, so you also just would have added to it. Oh,
Yeah,
but
I don't
that
have
was
any love for Atlanta, but yeah, like
Because we
Martin
we
Luther
discussed
King and
the Cop City situation too, which
Yes,
please go back and
yes,
watch that episode.
yes.
And
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
overall,
it didn't really
like
make any sense. The analogy doesn't really make sense. Only thing Magneto has a I think Magneto the internet likes to say Magneto had a point, and it's like, all right, that's one thing. Um, in terms of like when you hear Magneto talking about loving yourself and not being ashamed of being a mutant, that's where people try to pull this kind of Martin Luther King or not Malcolm X vibe. It's like, well, he's like, you need to love yourself. But after that point, even again, like we noted that was later on. He didn't even really do that in the original comics. But after
yeah,
that point, the response is to like just, go and murder everybody that you can find on the offensive.
It's
That's
still kind of
not
funny because like I didn't hear Magneto say we need mutant-owned businesses.
No,
Like
he
we
was
need
one. He was like, we need a mutant. I mean, he did say we need a mutant nation. To be fair,
I heard that
Oh
part. But
wow,
it's like
mutant nationalism. Oh shit.
yeah.
yeah,
But those are just weak connections because again, nationalism can go a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
you know what I'm
We'll
saying?
be here all day.
Yeah, so that
no,
doesn't
yeah.
necessarily inherently but it's primarily white folks that were making that shitty ass analogy, as we pointed out in the episode, that didn't even really know shit about Malcolm or Martin, and they were making that weak ass analogy. And like a lot of things that black people end up calling our own, we start taking on shit that white people made up and claims that white people make, and they were like, yeah, it's based on, and it's just like, no, it's not. It's actually not even a good analogy. And I'm a poet. I love analogies. I'm not against. I understand analogies are messy and they don't have to be perfect, so it's not even my issue. But this isn't a good one. So it's just like, like they don't have to be totally, not perfect. They don't have to be totally like perfect and lined up to be a good analogy. But this one doesn't have that. So anyway, those are the three we did together. We kind of went over here and there. The rest. We can close out for the sake of time and everything. Was there any other things people wanted to say? We'll be hitting the ground running next year. We got stuff coming up already recorded and going to get more recorded. Rasul just put out a book on hip hop. Currently reading that. So we'll have an episode on that soon. Man can write too fast. I experienced that very much working. Like when I took 3 months to write a chapter and he could do it in a weekend. So he already has another book out. I'm still recovering from the one I just wrote. So, so, so it's like, anyway, so we'll be having more stuff coming out. Got a lot of stuff on abortion, on body cams, on hip hop, and other things we'll get into as well. But
yeah.
I'm
anybody
just
else got
happy to have
anything?
all four of us on an episode again. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
As
was good to see
always,
this.
I
I'm
miss
just
my niggas.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
y'all are gonna
really
wait to
miss my nigga.
We got Notre Dame. Forgot about that. We're gonna be doing
Notre
a
Dame
movie
is coming up.
review.
Yes, excited for that.
Yeah.
We're gonna
I was
have
actually going
some.
to say something about that. Yeah, come see us at Notre Dame, our second live show. You know what I mean? Uh,
We're gonna have dope video this time.
we have a dope video this time. And if anybody want to, we'll have collection plates if you want to donate, while you're there to the Church of Black Joy, headed by Alexis Hardy.
Wow.
Okay, I'm done. I was just
Wow.
kidding. I was
Wow.
just kidding.
No,
That's definitely not making
the
the
funds are
cut.
gonna go to Terrell's diaper fund.
Diaper
Um,
fund. We got we
because
got all we got one hell of a diaper fund. We need one
Baby
hell of a
Rail is
diaper fund.
literally wiping his ass with 20s at this point for the shit that he needs. So
Yeah. Black, can we say anything about the
gosh.
Radical Conference? Or is that
Yeah, we can say that. I mean, I showed it to two of y'all. Like I made a new flyer or whatever. I'm not gonna keep
okay?
that part in, but I'm saying I might flash it if I got time in editing. I might throw it on the screen.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
that
So
is.
like people could come see us at our live event at Notre Dame, and also the Black Radical Conference that we're organizing and be in May. Shout out to BAP, Black Alliance for
But,
Peace,
but, but,
Community Movement Builders
Community
is
Movement Builders. Shout out to
yeah.
Kamal.
Jackson Rising and now Black Men Build is also a
Oh yeah,
co-sponsor.
shout out to them.
It'll
Shout out to
be
them.
at Butler University in Indianapolis. So
Mm,
yes. Indy, we expecting y'all to turn out, please.
yeah.
definitely.
As always, shout out to everybody who has stuck with us this far. and for sharing, getting the word out, spreading it, listening, learning, commenting, um, the good and the healthy critique. The rest of it, we just let y'all live. Um, I'm excited for next year. I am excited to be back with these three hooligans, nerding out and having a good time, and hopefully continuing to really hold it down and spread the good word. Since Ryan was
Yo,
talking about the church, might as well
the
end on
good word.
that. Spread the good word.
Spread the good word. Shout out to Black Miss Podcast. This is us signing off. Shout out to BLM. We out of here.
We out of here.
Peace.
Okay. Fresh out the plane in a whole nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was